Okay, thank you so much for being here tonight on this beautiful sunny evening in Vancouver. I think it's the nicest day we've had yet this year, which is hopefully a good omen for housing and transit in Vancouver. My name is Danny Oleksiuk. I'm a founding board member of Abundant Housing Vancouver. We started Abundant Housing in 2016, and as you all know, we are here tonight for a panel on housing and transit with three wonderful panelists. We have the Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs, Ravi Kahlon. We have Denis Agar from Movement, and we have Jennifer Bradshaw from Abundant Housing. Can we get a round of applause for our panelists? And most of you will probably know what Abundant Housing is, but just Abundant Housing Vancouver, a couple of words on who we are and how we got started and what we're trying to do. We are an all-volunteer nonprofit that was founded in 2016, and our mission is to get more housing for more people in Vancouver and in British Columbia. And to do that, we really focus on exclusionary zoning, which is zoning that has prevented all kinds of people from living in a lot of the city and a lot of the region for a long time. It's a big cause of our housing crisis and of the affordability problem. And for me, actually, I'm just realizing being back in this room, it goes back to about 10 years ago. I was in this room for a talk by, I think it was Heritage Vancouver, and former Mayor of Vancouver and Premier Mike Harcourt was on the panel sitting right here. And he said he made a pitch for ending single-family zoning in Vancouver, which in 2014 or 15 was pretty out there. I was really excited by it. And I started applauding. I was the only one to applaud. Nobody joined me. So thank you for being here tonight, 10 years later. I think it's maybe a sign of how things have changed a little bit. So yeah, why does this matter other than Mike Harcourt saying it 10 years ago? And maybe he wished he had done more as the mayor of Vancouver, although that was 20 years after he was mayor. But why does it matter? And for me, the reason I got into this, my personal story, is in 2016, I was a few years out of law school, starting to make okay money, and I grew up in a detached house in Vancouver, and just kind of always assumed that would be what I was going to do later. And I'd started doing the math in around 2015, 2016, 2017, when prices went up in some years by 30% year over year, and I was just like, that's never going to happen with the salary I have now and what I'm likely to have in the future. I'm going to have to, do some high-risk, high-reward acting career where I probably make nothing. But, law is just not going to get me there anymore. So a bunch of us saw that NIMBYs were really effective at getting their policies done, at maintaining. And sorry, is this? Should I move these apart from each other a little bit? Is the sound okay? Okay. We're really effective at getting this stuff done. And really what they did is they put up posters and they invited 5 people to a public hearing to the right time and place, and then they could talk directly to the mayor and to council. And typically the exact building wouldn't be rejected, but it would really influence policy. I mean, getting that kind of face time with an important decision maker is really valuable, and they were good at that. So we just said, hey, we can do that. We can put up a poster and bring 5 friends. And so we did, and that's basically Abundant Housing. So we don't have any paid staff. We don't have a lot of money. So my quick fundraising pitch is so that we can continue to put on events like this. Peter at the back, who most or all of you will have met on your way in, he has a little QR code. If you feel called to contribute to events like this in the future, please use that QR code and send us a couple bucks. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're here on the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And because we're here to talk about housing and exclusionary zoning, I just want to mention and congratulate them and thank them for the work the MST is doing at Jericho in particular. I mean, to get that many apartments in that part of the city, something no one else could have done, at this time and place, and I'm really excited for that project in particular. So the MST project is going to be fantastic when it's done. I love the beach, and Jericho Beach is one of my favorite spots. So just the thought that so many thousands of people are going to get to enjoy that is really exciting. I want to recognize a few people who I think are here tonight. I saw Councillor Lenny Zhou is here. Thank you for coming. I think I saw Brenda Bailey. Is Brenda Bailey in the room? Thank you, Minister of Finance. And Patrick Johnstone from New Westminster. Mayor of New Westminster is here as well. And then last housekeeping thing is I want to tell you all about some upcoming events that are really exciting. One is that Vancouver is having a by-election for 2 seats on April 5th. If you live in Vancouver, please get out and vote for that. The next is, we should have coordinated better, Dennis, but next Sunday, if you want more housing and transit, both Movement and Abundant Housing are doing events next Sunday at the same time. So you can decide what's more important to you, or go to neither if you're over it after today. But they're doing a rally for transit at Metrotown at what time? 1 p.m. And we are doing at 2 p.m. a walking tour, Missing Middle walking tour of Mount Pleasant at the Mighty Oak on West 18th in Vancouver is where we're starting. And then finally, we have monthly housing beers for Abundant Housing at the St. Regis, second Thursday of every night. The next one is April 10th. With that, I'm going to invite our panelists to come up here on stage, and I'm going to offer them each 5 minutes to do opening remarks, and then we'll get into some questions. So come on up, guys. Is this working? Great. And sorry, before you start, we have, we're going to hand around questions that you can write down and pass up if you have audience questions. And then I'll take a look at those and possibly ask some.
All right. I feel like I'm in a debate for an election or something, so it's great to be here. I want to also recognize the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and you're right. There's some amazing things happening, and what I find inspiring about MST in particular is, when you've been fighting to get your land back for so long. The first thing you think is, well, I finally got my land back, but MST is thinking, how do we solve the housing crisis for our people, but also help address the housing crisis for the entire community? And I think that's a beautiful thing that should be recognized, and I want to thank MST for the amazing work that they're doing. It's great to see my colleague Brenda here, Minister Bailey, sorry to make it official. If you want to see a pro-housing champion, my friend Brenda is one of the biggest pro-housing champions that I have at the cabinet table. When I have some tough decisions to bring forward, I usually just kind of lean over and look to Brenda to support me, because we want to make sure we get some big things done. Councillor Zhou, nice to see you here. Thank you. And Mayor from New Westminster, Patrick, I have to say there's some exciting things happening in New West, and I don't want to set up the expectations too high, but I think when some of the things that New West is bringing forward, they probably will be setting themselves up to be some of the biggest champions in British Columbia on housing. So I want to thank you for your leadership and the work you've been doing. It is great to be here again, and I was just laughing when I walked in, because last time I was here I just became Minister of Housing, and I came in here and I said I was going to do all these things, and I think people in the room were kind of thinking, yeah, right, you're going to do anything. And Peter was on stage grilling me, and so I prefer having Peter in the back of the room and not on the stage grilling me. It's much better this way. I want to start by thanking both Abundant Housing and Movement, because for somebody who's a housing policy geek, nothing is better for me on an evening to have an event with these two groups coming together, because the two things go hand in hand. I want to thank them for their advocacy. I want to thank all of you for your advocacy. All of you are here, and you're all doing your part in different ways. And quite frankly, the only reason why we're able to make the changes that we've made in British Columbia is because of people in this room. Fighting the fight for so long, making the public aware, changing the narrative in the public, preparing the public for the changes. And for us, it was actually the easy part, which was just doing the implementation of it. It came because of years of advocacy, 2016, realizing that, wow, I'm a lawyer and I can't afford to live in this community, and I want to fix that, not only for myself, but for my peers. And it takes that for many other people for doing the work. So I want to say a big thank you to all of you. To make my job, you've made my job easier. When I think I want to start, just if I can, just a summary of kind of where we've been over the last year, because there's been a lot happening. But we looked at the housing situation, and first thing I was thinking was, what do we want to fix? And there was like people coming up with different suggestions, and then we realized, wait a minute. Doing one-off solutions and one-off ideas is not going to address the challenge that we have. We have to look at the system as a whole, and that's what we did. We started with housing needs reports. Every community was doing something different. Some communities were deciding what they thought was important in the community, and others were doing others. And we could never compare communities with apples and apples because everyone was doing it differently. So we started with standardizing housing needs. We're the only province in the country that's doing it, but now everybody's thinking about doing the same thing, which is a positive step. Then we said, okay, once we've done that, what do we need to do next? Well, every community now needs to update their OCP to 20 years of housing need. And they have to do it every 5 years. So they have to go and engage with people in their community and hear from them about where the housing is needed, but not if housing is needed. Right? So I think that's an important distinction. Not that we can't have that debate anymore. The debate is housing is needed, but where? Where do you want the parks? Where do you want the housing? Where do you want the transit? Where do you want the community center? Where do you want all the important amenities that make livable communities? Then we took the big step of saying, once you have the OCP and you have a project that comes within it, no more public hearings, because you can't continue to relitigate decisions that have already been made. And then we took it a step further and said we need small-scale multi-unit housing, meaning every time there's a single-family lot that comes up, we must allow up to 4 units, in some cases 6 units. Then we said on transit, we want to make sure that we have transit-oriented development. When we invest in infrastructure, and transit is critically important infrastructure, we want to ensure that there's housing available around that. So we've got now zones put in place. We've taken additional steps to allow for single egress stairs. We've taken additional steps to remove additional barriers of local government. But all of this was done in I would say, as comprehensive as we could to try to change the conversation in communities. And I can tell you, because we're going to have lots of questions, I can tell you that it's changed the conversation. When we first started this, I remember going to my mayor in my community, and I said, this small-scale multi-unit, we had this big thing in Delta, and I shared this before. This family, Kathleen, she redeveloped her home and created 4 units. She was living in one, and the other 3 units were their kids. Multi-generational living. They'd all grown up on that parcel of land. Now all of them were living there. It was a front page of the paper, and everybody was so excited about it. And I said to my mayor, if it's so amazing for this family, then why does everybody have to fight so hard to get the same thing for their family? And so since then, we are seeing that. We're seeing friends come together and say, you know what? Why don't we all just try to build something and live together? We're seeing multi-generational living. I was raised, I'm fortunate to have raised my grandparents. They raised me. Parents were working. I am who I am because of that. And I think that that's an opportunity that more people should be able to get in their lives. And with the housing changes we've made, that's going to be available to more people. So I could go on for days, but I know that we want to have an exchange. Just that I'm excited about the things that we've done, but we've got a whole host of things that we still got to do, and I look forward to hearing some of those ideas today. So thank you for having me today.
Hi, everyone. Is this thing on? Yeah. I'm Denis Agar. I'm the Executive Director of Movement Metro Vancouver Transit Riders. How many people in this room are either volunteers or donors to Movement? Can I see you put up your hands? Thank you. We've existed for a year and a half. How many people are wearing movement clothing right now? 1, 2, okay, that's pretty good, we'll get there. That was a great story about how that one housing development changed that family's life. I think about the compassion that went into the creation of Abundant Housing Vancouver, the idea that we need more homes. So the more people can live here, we can accommodate more neighbors, everyone can live harmoniously. And I think movement is ultimately that, but for transit. That we need more transit for all of the reasons that cities matter, that cities change people's lives, that we need to welcome people. This region has been growing fast. We can't grow without infrastructure. You've heard that in the news a million times. But ultimately in Metro Vancouver, the population is up 13% since 2020, and transit service is up 0%. And that has led to severe overcrowding in some parts of the region and cuts in others, where TransLink is cutting service in the slightly less crowded parts of the region and shifting those buses to the places that are desperately overcrowded. And some of those places where the cuts are happening are in Vancouver, are the places that would traditionally be like the places that we would densify because we think, oh, these places have good transit. They actually have worse transit now than they have in decades. Transit is more important to Vancouver than other cities. Vancouver is built different. And I guess I'll say Metro Vancouver as a region. We have far more transit ridership per capita than almost any other city in North America, especially cities that are of our vintage, cities that have developed mostly after World War II. And so when there's a shortage of transit or when there's a threat of cuts, it's much more of just a calamity, a potential calamity for this region. Whereas a city like Seattle, just down the road, they have far less transit ridership. They're much more reliant on their freeway network. We never built those, to the credit of our predecessors in the early Vancouver urbanist movement. So we ultimately have to think through what a transit shortage means and really, really take it seriously. That's what our organization does. We're advocating for better transit, more transit. I'm gonna just jump through some of these and just skip them. And maybe just say that our vision is that every street in the region that moves a significant number of people on transit. There are a lot of streets in Metro Vancouver where over half the people on the street are in a bus. So streets like those, and even ones that are moving 30% of people on buses, those streets would have all-day bus lanes. The traffic signals would go green when the bus is coming. There are ways that are really cheap and easy and fast to make transit better. Of course, we need more buses, but those are the measures that we can implement to make those buses faster and more reliable. And in the long term, big, ambitious transit investment plans. We see cities like Toronto investing twice as much per capita in transit expansion, and cities like Los Angeles that have $150 billion transit plans, those kinds of things. So there's cheap and easy things we can do now, and big, expensive things we can do over the long term. That's where I'm gonna leave it. Oh, you have a mic. Yeah.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm Jen. I'm a director of Abundant Housing Vancouver. 10 years ago, I came back to Vancouver after grad school. This was right around the time when there was this big push to build temporary modular housing in Vancouver and in New West. And the need, even back then, was so clear to me that, to me, it was obvious, of course we should build these. However, I was kind of shocked back then to see a lot of organized opposition to them. It was my first taste of NIMBYism in the real world. I wanted to join an organization that was supporting temporary modular housing, social housing, supportive housing, and I found Abundant Housing Vancouver, and it was my grassroots organization of choice, largely because there are so many data-driven people in it, like Jens von Bergman and lovely folks. Since then, I learned that the opposition wasn't just against supportive housing or temporary modular housing. It was consistently against higher density multifamily housing. And this was quite strange to me because I had lived in many small apartments in Mexico City, where I was doing grad school, Taipei, Tokyo, and these kinds of housing aren't allowed to be built in most of Metro Vancouver. I knew that it was the more affordable housing type, though, especially compared to like luxury, big detached houses. Yet the opposition seemed to think that the apartments were luxury. More importantly, though, our city policies also really made it really difficult to build these smaller apartments. These are also more environmentally friendly, and yet they put the apartments on the arterial streets. So that's where I live too in my current apartment. I don't own a car, I take public transit every single day, and yet I'm the one who is living with all the pollution on these arterial roads. Public taking apartment dwellers are treated as second-class citizens, and it needs to end. It's all really, really regressive. This is really the reason why I've been a housing advocate for the last 10 years with Abundant Housing Vancouver, and there's really just so much more still to be done to build more public transit, fix all of this regressiveness in the housing system, and build housing for everyone in every neighborhood.
Thank you all for those excellent opening comments. My first question is for Minister Kahlon, and it's about kind of big picture about growth. I mean, more topical question with everything going on with the U.S. and annexation talk and economic tariffs to weaken our economy. Obviously, that's really focused the attention on how do we grow. And there's a famous within YIMBY sphere paper that I think it's by Moretti and Say, if I'm saying that right, where these two Berkeley economists, they estimated that the U.S. economy was 36% smaller than it otherwise would have been because of exclusionary zoning. And the mechanism there is that people can't move to high growth cities. Like when New York boomed, when Chicago boomed back in the day before zoning, people just moved from low-wage places to high-wage places, and that was not only good for the individuals moving, it was great for the whole economy because it meant that the productive places could be matched by more workers. In the U.S. more recently, in like San Francisco, New York City, they've not been growing. In fact, California has, as I think many of us know, actually been losing representation in the House. So all of which is to say, to what extent is this a concern for you? And I know you also have some trade work in your portfolio. What do you see with the connection between growth and zoning? And I guess the last thing I'll add is all the housing is built in BC. I mean, you can't buy American-made housing. I mean, some of the products maybe, but a lot of the work's done here.
Yeah, it's a pretty big question. I'll start with the pandemic, actually, if I can. Just something that we saw coming out of the pandemic was a lot more people working remotely, and we saw a lot of people leaving cities because they couldn't afford them, and they were moving to smaller towns. And all of a sudden, I'd have mayors come to me and say, remember I was asking you for wireless and internet connection in my community? Boy, do I regret that. Because now we've got all these folks coming, I need childcare, I need all these things. And so we did see a big push from folks moving from communities where there was lack of housing to smaller communities. But we're also seeing the opposite. A lot of folks who maybe acquired a lot of wealth that lived out in the suburbs, and they saw their property values go up, moving back to cities because there's better access to amenities and services. So there's a lot of movement happening. But my view is people should be able to live in any part of the community, in any community that they want to live in, and they shouldn't have to commute long distances to do that. And so, I do get, with all the changes we've made, we do get that a lot from local governments who say, well, why not just do this way over there? Why not do it over there? And then I hear from communities that are kind of way over there saying, why are you doing this here? Look at the lifestyle we have, like we have one house in every acre, this is so great. And so it's just the nature of things, that the conversation around housing is that everybody wants it elsewhere. Nobody wants it next to them. Everyone knows there's a housing crisis, but nobody wants housing. And we have to get past that as a society. And if I can just make one comment about both the organizations, Abundant Housing has been leading this conversation and really changing people's mindset. And a lot of the work that you've been doing has helped leverage those changes, not only in Vancouver, but in other communities. And the work Movement is doing, I love, because it's not only about big major projects of transit. It's also those small little wins in communities. And you got to focus on both, because in some communities, they haven't seen major infrastructure and they can't imagine the dollars associated with it. But if you can get them to shift one lane, that's a big win in that community, and that win catapults into something much bigger. So I think that the work continues. We have a lot of work to do, and the reality is now we're dealing with tariffs, and two things are for sure. One, when the tariff conversation calms down, housing will again be the #1 topic in people's minds. That's a guarantee. And if the tariffs continue, which is possible, that any economic recovery is going to need housing at the center of it, because you can't have healthcare unless you have housing, and you can't have a strong economy unless you have housing. And so this conversation is going nowhere. In fact, it's moving. And I think we need champions at local government. Elections coming up, the next municipal elections coming up, like everybody should be gearing up. We need more housing champions to get elected. We need more Mayor Johnsons. We need people to get out there, and Lenny's and I've been talking about housing for a long time. We need champions to go out there and say, let's do more, let's do more, let's do more. And the other second thing I have to mention is, for those of you who live in Vancouver, you may know that all communities have to update their OCPs to 20 years of growth by the end of this year. Vancouver will have their first citywide ODP, and they have to have it done by June next year. That is massive. We have not seen an opportunity like this to see some progressive movement, some change when it comes to housing. And so I strongly recommend to everybody, get involved in the groups, get active, because this next year is critical if you want to see housing options available in our communities, whether it's anywhere in BC or specifically in Vancouver. That was a long answer, sorry.
It was a big question. Yeah. Thanks for that. Next question's for Dennis, and I'd like you to comment on tall and sprawl, or the grand bargain. I mean, you were a planner at TransLink, and I mean, Vancouver's pretty good at building nodes of towers that you can travel in between on SkyTrain, but there's often, and particularly like Nanaimo Station, Lake City, not a lot in between in some places. As a transit planner and with movement, what do you think about the tall and sprawl model, and do you think we should move away from it? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm in this room, and I'm friends with many of you, so I think you can probably guess my answer, that I think we should allow more density, not just right at the SkyTrain station, but all around. And, there's been a lot of talk recently about kind of a bit of a pushback on the housing mandates from the province, saying, oh, we don't have enough infrastructure. But in terms of transit, there is a lot of infrastructure that exists that's been underutilized. And I think that should play a role in the conversation, that like, okay, maybe we don't have enough sewer infrastructure, but we have a ton of transit infrastructure. Maybe that tips the scales and we rezone Nanaimo Station and 29th Avenue Station, for example. But I'm always thinking as well about with the desperate situation with housing in this region, that we end up with so much housing built beside neither, right? Like if you look at what's happening on 200th Street in the township of Langley, you have so much density going in a place where transit is really infrequent. And that can change, and that will change. There will be BRT, it's gonna be great. But when we refuse to build housing at Nanaimo, we're building housing out way further out, where it can be really challenging to service by public transit. Those are predominantly going to be car trips coming in and out of that place for at least a generation. So yeah, no, I don't like tall and sprawl.
If I can add to that a little bit as well. So right now I live in Joyce Collingwood Station or near it. I actually live on Kingsway, right? Arterial road, lots of pollution. I want to live near the station. Towers are starting to go up there, but it's, decades, 20, 30 years since we had the Expo line go up. So it's been forever. The gap between when the transit goes in, especially rapid transit like SkyTrain stations, and then the housing follows 30 years later, too slow. We need those things coming up ideally at the same time, or if not, like the housing can come first. It doesn't, honestly, it's fine, but the gap has to be shortened. And this reminds me, of course, of the current discussions around the line towards UBC. We should really get the housing going ASAP. And so I'm really curious what I love this time frame that you've given the city of Vancouver, but also I would love to get those stations quickly designated as quickly as possible. We really need to start planning and building that housing now, because we know that the cities are too slow at building housing still. Not looking at Patrick Johnson at all. Maybe more at the city of Vancouver a bit more, because we can't have that anymore. We're making these massive billions of dollars of investment in these lovely public transit that we absolutely desperately need, but we also need the housing to come up at the same time. Get more people like me who are now currently living on Ontario's. I live in social housing in one of the market units that cross-subsidize the non-market units, but all of us in this housing is living on the polluted arterials. We could be living right near the station if we had more housing there. So please, faster.
And you know what? I don't want to do buses dirty, because the situation in a lot of parts of Vancouver is that you have this beautiful grid where you can, in a lot of places in Vancouver, travel in 2 or like in 4 directions on transit at any given point. And that's such an underestimated asset. You know, it's really transformational for your life, going from, ooh, transit's a bit of it's a bit of a challenge, to like, oh yeah, it's just easy. And so there's so much territory that meets that criteria in the region that can be upzoned. And if you look at the frequencies, like trying to plan housing around the most frequent routes, more and more, those are in Surrey. Now, because there has been so much overcrowding in Surrey in the last 3 years, TransLink has reacted by cutting service in Vancouver, shifting it over to Surrey, to the point where now you have big chunks of Whalley and Newton where buses are coming every 6 minutes. So that's a real opportunity to upzone.
If I can just add to that, I think, folks come to us all the time and they say, okay, you've done TOA, you've done the bus depots, what's next? And I think that the greatest next opportunity is around major transit growth areas, because a lot of plannings have been already happening at the metro level. There's an understanding that there's a lot of transit there, and it's only going to grow, and that's kind of the future areas where growth is expected. And I do think that we're not capitalizing as a region enough on those areas. So that is something that we're going to be spending some time over the next year to have conversations about how do we expand more housing opportunities in those areas, not only on the line, as you say, but in the whole, I'd say a kilometer distance around that space.
Jen, you touched on, all of you kind of did, but you particularly touched on one of my pet issues, which is arterial balconies. I'm just curious, what side of the building is your unit on?
Luckily, I face away from the arterial, but all of my neighbors, of course, face the arterial, and none of those balconies are ever used. You'll definitely see this kind of divide where the people who live on the other side of the building, like my balcony, we use the balconies, but the folks facing the arterial, they never do. And you know why, right? Most people here, I'm sure, in this room have read all these studies where the cancer risks, neurological disorders, all of these risks, asthma, go up the more you're on the arterial, breathing in those fumes, bringing in those micro particulates, etc. So you know why? Nobody wants to hear the loud noises, even if the cars themselves are electric. When they're going fast, like along an arterial, it's the tires. It's physics, right? The tires make all the noise. So it's really loud, really polluted. Walking along those arterials also is difficult. And because it's 6 lanes, crossing the road is such a nightmare, so much that I never use the businesses on the other side of the street. And this area, Joyce Collingwood, has tons of old, largely like Asian community, huge Asian community, also Black community. And all of the elders struggle so much to cross the road. There's like nice grocery stores on the other side of the street, Safeway, and then fresh grocers on the other side of the street. And very few people can cross that road safely and surely. So of course, we should build more bus-only lanes and bike lanes, etc., on the arterial, but also, please, allow housing off of the arterial. And like Ravi said, kilometer ride around every single station and every single rapid bus station. I love this room.
This one's for Minister Kahlon again. One of the things I'm really excited about and want to see in Vancouver, which is the city I grew up in, is 4-6 story apartments on parks. this is not something we have very much of, but I think is it Chilco Street? What's the street in the West End right between Stanley Park and all of those? Yeah, I mean, many of us have walked down there, and that kind of thing. It's so nice. I mean, those are balconies people are going to hang out on. So I think of parks like Caldecott, Trafalgar, Shaughnessy Park, Devonshire Park, if anyone even knows where that is. There's all of these. Does anyone know Devonshire Park in... It's pretty big, and nobody is ever there. It could really use some. It's actually it's bigger than Dude Chilling Park, which is full in the summertime. So I mean, you want the cities to build more generally, but how do we get them building on parks instead of busy streets?
Councillor Zhao, over to you. Yeah, I think the crowd wants to hear the answer. No, I'm kidding. I wouldn't do that to you. I generally agree. And the question is, how do we make that happen? And I'm going to go back to my earlier point, the ODP. It's a big moment. It's a big moment. We got to get people engaged in that in Vancouver and the communities, the OCP changes in all communities. It's the time to have those conversations. I often get two things. The point that you've made around some of our parks and green space and how do we have housing around that. And the second is around our schools. It's a shame that we have schools that are closing down because there's no families living there. But it's the reality. I mean, it's not a reality in Surrey because the population is growing and we are rapidly growing and trying to build more schools. But we have schools in Vancouver, that's depressing. That's a sign of not a healthy community. If you don't have kids in a community, that is not a healthy community. And so I would say for parks and schools, it's something that we need to push part of the OCP conversation. If your question is, am I going to force it on communities? The answer is no. I think we've made a lot of changes, but I do think it makes so much sense that it doesn't require much convincing. I think it's just being out there, being proactive. To your opening comments, the folks who are at these meetings are the ones who have time. Often they're doing pretty well, and they don't want to see their community change. And I said this the last time I was here, and I'll say it again, that when we first introduced the changes, I was door knocking in my community, and this gentleman at the door said to me, "Ravi, I get it. I know why you're doing it. My kids are, talking about leaving the province, but I don't want my community to change." And my answer to him is the same that I've given to anybody, is that whether you want your community to change or not, it's been changing for 40, 50 years. The building structures haven't been changing, but who can afford to live in your community has been changing that entire time. And so I would say that the time for pushing local governments to consider parks, and now that you've told me about this new park, I'm gonna go check it out because it sounds like heaven, quiet. But that and housing around schools, I think it just makes sense, and we gotta push that.
Can I just add that I used to live in East Van, not far from Trout Lake, and that other park whose name I forget, that's kind of behind Kingsway and Nanaimo. And in both places, it's these are all Vancouver special neighborhoods, filled with Vancouver specials. And the garages are what face the park, not the actual house. And so it's backing onto this incredible, beautiful asset. You got this Trout Lake Park, a garage, and then a tiny lawn, and then a person's house. And there's no hope that they could ever see their kids playing in the park from their windows because there's a garage in the way.
It's because we prioritize homes for cars over homes for people.
I mean, the car has a beautiful view of Trout Lake. I don't know.
It's a lucky car.
Yeah. Yeah, we treat them right. Anyway, that's my rant.
Speaking a little bit about children and housing, one of the misconceptions that I like to talk about often is how a lot of people in North America generally, I come from Japan, Tokyo. I'm surrounded by all my cousins. They have kids they're all growing up in apartments. Very few people, only the richest really have detached houses in Tokyo. And so What I find is a misconception oftentimes is that, oh, we need more missing middle because it's good family-oriented housing. But I think that's a bit, yes, it is, sure. But also, apartments are actually also totally fine for families. I see the Asian lady room saying yes, 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 I know, right? I don't get it. I think it's quite frankly classist. I get it, people here are not used to it, but 3-4 bedroom apartment buildings are totally fine to grow up in. And like I said, my apartment building is full of children. What we are seeing in Vancouver is the low density neighborhoods that are losing children. They still have these big, supposedly family-oriented housing that nobody can afford, the big detached houses that have no kids anymore left in them. They've left years and years ago. They're grown up and ready to have kids but can't afford it because we only have the really small apartments. Now, this is not to say that we shouldn't have small apartments. I absolutely needed it when I was a student. Lots of people need them. They're the cheapest. The smaller the cheaper it is. So we need those. We need housing for everybody. So yes, we need family-oriented housing. We need family-oriented apartments. And we need housing for single people. Everybody deserves housing. And so I would like to say that we need to build more densely around schools, around parks, around rapid transit stations, and we shouldn't be all that picky about whether it's family-sized or whether it's ground-oriented. No, we just need a lot more housing. As much as possible, high density around these lovely amenities.
Dennis, this one's for you. And I don't know the answer, but I'm just curious. What transit route in the Lower Mainland do you think most needs improvement, and why?
Oh, man.
You can only pick one?
29, up zone 29.
We have some great people in this audience that would love to answer that question. Y'all know what I'm going to say. It's the 49. Can I hear it for the 49? Woo! Yeah! The 49 runs across South Vancouver from UBC to Burnaby through Sunset, Punjabi Village. It is the busiest local bus route in Metro Vancouver, and it moves twice as many people as Via Rail Canada, our national railway, in a day. This one bus route. And when we started movement, it was really a lot focused around the 49. We actually postered along the route and just anonymously asked people to submit their comments about their daily experience on the 49. We didn't even identify that it was affiliated with a group. It was just like random posters, send in your comments about the 49. People were saying they were getting passed up by 4 buses in a row that were all full. They couldn't get on any of them. So it's just and Translink has increased service recently on the 49, and it's not enough. There's a latent demand for good, frequent, capacious transit. And I could go on about the 323, the 335. There's about 10 routes in this region that are in desperate situations, and then about 100 that are in slightly less desperate situations. But, I mean, that's why we're pushing, yeah.
All the community shuttles that cost $20 a trip that we are wasting money on. Why don't you say that?
So we've been campaigning really hard. We have a campaign called Save the Bus, savethebus.ca. We're pushing both MLAs and mayors really hard to try and come to an agreement that not only prevents cuts, but boosts service. We've had a 13% increase in population since 2020, so that would be a great number for an increase in service, 13%. But anyway, I think that was my window for a pitch, and I took it.
I mean, if you're doing this right, there's a lot of windows for pitches. Jen, I think you grew up, in the district of North Vancouver. And so I imagine you have a high school cohort, some of whom you might still be in touch with from there. Actually, I see my good friend Brian also from North Vancouver is there, so I've heard a bit through him as well. What have you observed from that cohort, and what are your thoughts on that?
So the district in North Vancouver, when I was growing up there 30 years ago, was relatively middle class. My father is a single income teacher, and we could still afford that house there, right? Nowadays, the houses there are $2, $3, sometimes $4 million. It's what we would call gentrified, but it's not like the housing has changed. It's really just the region has grown. Only the smaller and smaller, highest percentage of people in terms of income are now living there, right? So the new houses on my parents' block are all big mansions. Oftentimes, CEOs, C-suites, rich people are the only ones that can live there. My cohort, my age cohort, and younger, none of us live in District of North Vancouver anymore. They don't build housing. They say no to social and supportive housing all the time, which is why I think that social housing and supportive housing should be by right. Honestly, I think that BC housing, that the BC government should say, yes, maybe don't force communities to do certain things, but I think there does have to be a set sort of minimum viable amount of housing, especially the types that are desperately needed, have to be just by right, I think. And so District of North Vancouver now has very, very few young people left in there. And there's actually a lot, we were just talking with Dennis earlier about how there's a lot of commuting going to District of North Vancouver, all of the caretakers, the landscapers, people taking care of these now quite elderly and relatively wealthy people in these big detached houses. The only people that might live there, honestly, are oftentimes in like the illegal basement suites. And so, yeah, it's really unfortunate what's happened in District of North Vancouver with some schools at risk of closing, etc., because there's just oftentimes either a flat line in terms of population growth, or even in like West Van's case, occasionally decreasing. So there was a bit of a push during COVID to go out and back into those basement suites oftentimes of those houses, but now that that's mostly ended, the people are moving back into the cities, etc. So really unfortunate, and so it really speaks to the issue of how it's not really just about the city of Vancouver, although I am of course living here and that's my main focus, but it is about all of these there's suburbs, they're oftentimes very wealthy suburbs, really in desperate need of more housing. And honestly, I think that the province, I'm glad that the province is starting to step in more and issuing those, yes, these transit areas, they need to upzone. Honestly, I want to see more of that.
One of the things when I started doing this work that is still really important to me is parking policy. I learned a lot from the now late and great Donald Shoup's book, The High Cost of Free Parking. And recently, the province made huge reforms, getting rid of minimum parking requirements for a lot of areas. And then the city of Vancouver went further and just got rid of minimum parking requirements, which you told me right? Yeah, okay, let's give a round of applause for that. Thank you, City of Vancouver. I would not have seen that coming. I've spoken with municipal councillors who tell me this is the main thing that people talk to them about, or I've spoken to them about. So having made these big changes, how much pushback have you actually got on that particular piece?
You should see my emails. I jokingly said this earlier, but I kind of mean it. If we were as concerned about housing as we are for housing for cars and parking spots, we wouldn't be in a housing crisis. The number one issue I hear about is parking. And, our philosophy is simple. If you have access to transit, you need flexibility. And if you don't, of course you need parking. If you're commuting, if you're in a suburb and you have no transit near you, yes, you're going to need to park your car, and you're probably going to have a tenant. They're going to need this spot. But we're in some parts of our communities, we're just taking too much land that could be available for housing to just build parking. And so the step we took around eliminating parking minimums near transit was a big step, and of course Vancouver took it another step, and I think a really positive direction. But the discussion about parking continues. I would say it's less now, especially in suburb communities. It's a little bit less now, but that was the initial reaction from people. Where are we going to put our cars? Where are cars going to park? And then when that calmed down and people realized that you're still going to have some ability to do that, I think now it's opening up a new conversation. It's a different conversation in Vancouver, and it's a different conversation in suburbs. And it's okay. It's okay for each community to be in a different place in the conversation. But I do see it evolving quite a bit. And for a lot of folks, in particular in suburbs, they were like, wait a minute, people live without cars? Yeah, honestly, I got so many people that are like, well, how do they get around? And I'm like, yeah, well, people can bike, they can take transit. They're like, what? And so I think part of it was just opening people's eyes to, like the reality of most people now is they can't afford to have a car. You can't afford to have the insurance. You have built your life around being able to walk and cycle and take your electric scooter. And that's a healthy thing, I think. And you're seeing that conversation happening in a lot of suburb communities. And I think that's game-changing when it happens there. Because it always feels like people in suburb communities are like, that's a Vancouver thing. That's something that's happening over there. It's not happening over here. Well, it is. It's happening everywhere. It's just below the surface and people are not seeing it, but now they are. So that's a long way of saying, yeah, I think the step we have taken has been positive. And by the way, we've had some developments come back to us and say, thank you for getting rid of the parking minimums. We're actually going to put more parking than the city actually wanted us to put in, because our market segment is totally different. And then we've had some that, for example, BC Housing projects, where we have a project of just seniors units for seniors, and we're like, we don't need any parking, and we engage with seniors and we say, what do you want? And they say, well, quite frankly, everything's nearby, we're gonna walk, but I've got a scooter and I need to be able to plug it in to charge it up. Can you create that for me? And so having the ability to have whoever's building right-size the parking for themselves, for whoever they're providing housing for, is actually, I think, going to create the most efficiencies that we can possibly see. So positive, it's really great. Occasionally still we hear concerns, but we're getting past that overall.
I'll just add to that I live near here and I don't have parking with my condo. So I pay a lot of money every month. I need a car for work to park my car in something of a free market, so I mean that kind of thing does work as well.
Yeah, I mean we just moved into a building that has parking, and we brought a car with us, and we were kind of on the bubble as to whether to keep it or not, like just in terms of how much we use it and the cost and everything. It's kind of like on the fence. But the parking is free and it's included in our rent, so that really tips it. I think we'll just probably keep the car, right? You know what I mean? That's how these decisions get made.
It's not actually free though, Dennis.
I know, the high cost of free parking, I get it. What did I actually want to say here? Oh, just that, I want to really highlight the fact that people, like elected officials, get so many emails and interactions about parking, right? Like, that's just a known thing, that parking takes up a surprisingly large part of the job for municipal politicians, and I'm hearing even for provincial politicians too. That's power, right? Like, that is a way to access power. It sounds trifling and kind of silly, like, oh, just send emails and just like complain to the minister when you see him at a golf course or something. But that's power. Like, that works. And
What do you think I do in my spare time?
am I warm? No. Okay. All right. And so that's part of the theory of change around why movements started, is because I think we need transit riders to start using those kind of simple and free ways of accessing power by getting in the inbox and the voicemail and the, maybe not golf course, soccer field?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Get closer. Warmer.
Of ministers and councillors and that kind of thing. Not to bug you, but to just like empower you, so that when you're making your mental calculations about what risks to take and what not to take, like you can decide, oh, hey, actually investing in transit isn't a risk because I know I've got the wind of thousands of people at my back if I do it.
If I can just add to that, I think the most important thing you can do in your advocacy is when you see somebody do a good thing, also tell them. I can count the amount of emails I have from people saying thank you. You don't get them very often, but when you do, you're like, you get a little shocked because you're like, what the heck? This is not normal. Is this fake? And so, I think when you see a councillor or a mayor come forward and do something positive to say, hey, we understand you're doing it, we think that's a good thing, that's advocacy. Because it's reminding people that doing the right thing is actually positive as well. And so I would always say do both. Do the sandwich, positive, critique, positive. That's what my parents used to do with me,
Just honestly, Ravi, you have been the best housing minister BC has had for like decades, and I don't say that honestly.
Thank you.
The fact that you are leaning into the cities and making sure that we are upzoning these transit-oriented areas, honestly, I'm hoping, of course, that you go a step further and just making it by right and making it, forget your OCPs. You have to do it. I'm sorry. Sorry, Lenny. Too bad. But honestly, the fact that you've gone that step is further than anybody else in probably all of Canada. So thank you. Please keep going.
It worked.
It
I was
works.
trying to get a thank you out of her, and it worked. Just kidding. Thank you.
And what's a little bit frustrating about transit is that the problem is a bit more diffuse, right? That the mayors could step up and fund it, the province could step up, maybe the feds will wake up and start funding transit operations too, but it's just kind of like not exactly, the ball isn't in someone's court in some of the same way that it is for you. But that said, I'm glad you brought up the thinking bit, because even today I started thinking about the party that we will throw when the mayors and the province come to an agreement to significantly increase transit service in a few weeks for Translix's investment plan. Am I right? Yeah.
That's obviously. The mayor's clapping the loudest, so I like that.
I was looking for the finance minister. All right, yeah.
The preemptive thank you that's a great strategy. Yeah, thank you for the policy
Just
you're
throwing
about
spaghetti
to
at the wall.
pass.
He just took what I said to another level, which was awesome.
Dennis, I wanted to ask you, going back a minute, pull on that thread of transit and affordability a little bit, and how much does that factor into movements work? Like if a family can get rid of their car or household can downsize by one car, I mean, it's what is that? $8,000 a year on average, and after tax. I mean, it's we talk a lot about housing and affordability, but maybe not as much about transit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you want my honest thoughts for kind of a friendly room, I really want to always, as much as possible, shift the focus onto the people that are already on the bus. You know what I mean? Because I think there's often, like with transit, it's like, oh, let's build this and it'll get so many people to transit. Oh, let's just persuade people and they'll take transit. There's already 1 million people that use transit in this region at least once a week. And so a lot of them are having trouble getting to work on time because the bus is so full, it shows up to their stop full, or that the street that their bus runs on doesn't have bus lanes, and so the trip time is super variable from day to day. And so I always try and refocus to that, but absolutely, Danny, you're right that part of the pitch for transit investment is that it can help people. There's always that near market, like the group of people that are kind of on the fence of like, should I take transit, should I drive? And there's a lot of them out there in Metro Vancouver, I think, that we can get on transit. On that note, maybe the one thing I'll add is that there's some really interesting research around like Raj Chetty is this social science researcher in the US, and he picked apart what are the different ways that people get out of poverty, what were the factors that led to it, and one of the biggest that he could find is commute time, that people with shorter commutes to work were more likely to be able to move up and get out of poverty and have a safe income. And so I think they have more time to spend at home, they spend less time commuting. The causality is like, we can kind of come up with ways. I think also they have access to more different jobs. So if they, are not happy with one, they want more of an increased wages, they can switch to another. But yeah, there's so many angles for transit investment. Yeah.
I'll just say, add one more thing, which is the conversation of transit is evolving so fast, partly because we've got now young people get free access to transit. And so like I've got a kid, he's 14 years old, and I remember like 2 years ago, he called me and he said, oh, I'm in Guildford. And I said, oh, okay, did your mom drop you off? He's like, no, I took the bus. And I was horrified because I'm like, 12 people, what are they going to say about me? 12-year-old kid just goes. But there's the next generation is just so comfortable with it because it was made accessible to them. And so the conversation is changing, right?
It's normal in Asia, guys.
It is. No, I hear
Baby
ya.
steps.
But it's just not
Baby
there
steps,
now.
yeah.
But I'll give you another example. I take the bus all the time. So I take the 312. The 312 gets me to Scott Road Station. Scott Road Station gets me here. When I'm standing at the 312 bus, I get at least 2 or 3 people pull over and be like, what are you doing here? Like, do you need a ride? Like, can I drive you somewhere? And I'm always like, no, waiting for the bus. And they're like, you are waiting, like in some communities, like in the South Asian community, they're like, what? You're a minister of the government. What are you doing? But so I think there's a cultural shift that's happening as well. There's a lot of folks that have misconception of who should be on transit and who shouldn't be on transit, and that's changing as well, which is only going to lead to more people accessing transit in a healthy way, I think.
I think we need a round of applause for a politician riding the bus.
Oh, there's
if
a
we
lot
can,
of...
yeah. Not just the train, but the bus, right?
One time, I think it was my colleague Brenda and I was at the SkyTrain station, and I was about to get on. I think 3 or 4 of us saw each other all on the same SkyTrain, and we're like, hey. So we're all on there. Actually, Adrian Dix is on this. If you ever want to meet with Adrian Dix, you can't get a meeting, just hang around the SkyTrain station or the bus. He's flying around everywhere, and so it's just the reality of now living in Metro Vancouver, everyone's taking transit, and so it's just not me. That's my point. Everybody's on it.
I love it.
Love it.
Janet, I wanted to ask you about, you touched on, the cultural differences in other places. And one of the things I noticed early on in abundant housing, a lot of people who were drawn to abundant housing had spent some time living somewhere else, whether it was the Middle East or Europe or East Asia. And I've spent some time in Australia and in East Asia as well. So just generally, what are some of the stuff that I think we could learn a lot more from some of those growing cities over there. What's some of the stuff that you saw living over there that you think we could adopt here?
So I loved my university experience. So I did an exchange for a year to Taipei, where I had this really small, lovely apartment, basically right across the street from National Taiwan University, NTU, and it was probably the best year of my life. It was, I don't know, like about the size of this podium thing here, and I didn't spend much time there, right? I'm in the university city, I'm walking around, all these wonderful, amazing streets, the street food, oh my gosh, the street food. So honestly, yes, small apartments aren't for everybody, but for people in certain stages of their lives, they're very affordable and accessible, important, so close to things that you need access to, like the university, that I quite honestly miss that. I wish that we had more housing options in Vancouver that aren't necessarily for families always, but yes, there's a range of people and needs, and we don't have to cater to every single need for every single building or every single housing unit. So more of that variety will be wonderful. Japan is another one. Of course, I'm sure a lot of people in this room know that Japan has zoning that is not at the city level, it's federal. So they don't discriminate in their housing policy between, housing is housing. Housing zone, they don't discriminate between an apartment versus a house. A house is by right, the most expensive thing is by right, and an apartment is tons of fees, tons of rules, tons of approval processes. No, forget that. They treat housing the same, which means in practice that you don't discriminate between apartment dwellers and people that can afford these big detached houses, right? So realistically, zoning is truly exclusionary. Sorry, planners, you guys tend to pretend that, we don't discriminate, or it's about the use. No. If it was truly about use, you wouldn't discriminate between housing. Housing is housing. Residential areas should be open to all types of housing. So that's definitely one of the big things. Where I think we're running low on time, so I don't want to rant too much. I could rant more. But yeah, Japan and Taiwan, lots of areas that in East Asia in particular, but also big growing cities like Mexico City that we can all learn a lot more from.
Thanks for that. This one's for Minister Kahlon. It's from the audience, actually, and they're asking, how should we think about the financial viability of projects and whether our policies are creating projects that pencil out? That's changed a lot over the past couple of years, too.
Yeah, it's a tough market right now. Interest rates going up, we've, not now, but they went up rapidly. The cost of products going into buildings. And so for us, a lot of the effort was to remove barriers so that we can get decisions faster because we know time is money. And we still have additional barriers now. And that's all projects. Doesn't matter if you're building not-for-profit housing or if you're building private housing. It's a real challenge for us. We just made changes to move back some of our accessibility requirements as a step to do that. And we still have some of the best in the country, but that was not an easy decision to make because we need those units for people. But given the times and the situation we're in, we felt it was important. We're starting to engage right now with our partners at Metro around how we can find ways to offset some of the costs that they have there to help lower some of the costs on housing. We're looking at DCC payments, and can we create a new structure that helps alleviate and gives a little bit of relief to projects. So we're looking at a whole host of measures to continue to have housing to be viable in our communities. And then if you add tariffs on top of that, you mentioned the homes are going to be built by people here, but we have anywhere between 40 and 60% of our building supplies coming from the U.S. So that's a challenging proposition for us, given that we don't know what happens. Like some mornings I wake up and I hear a tweet from the president, and then at lunch you hear an official say something else, and then the president comes on Twitter and says, oh, no, I meant the first thing. And so policy's changing so much, and all that uncertainty is having a major impact in our housing as well as everywhere. But it shows up in housing first, where people are not buying now because they're kind of like, what the heck's going to happen in the market? Let's just wait and see. So we are looking at everything. And one of the things when I got into the role was one of the things I said to myself, and I try to remind myself all the time, is don't get too wedded on one policy. Like sometimes you bring something in, you're like, oh, I brought it in, and no matter what, I'm going to defend this policy. When you're dealing with a crisis, you got to go in, you got to do something, you can't be afraid of doing it, but then you got to look at it and say, okay, did it have the desired outcome? And if not, then you got to pivot. I think that's healthy. And so we're looking at a whole host of things to say, it worked for the moment we were in. Is this the moment that it needs to be in? I can't go further in it, but we are looking at a whole host of things to try to make sure the housing can continue to be built.
Just to touch very briefly on, you mentioned development costs. So one of the things that cities, municipalities tend to do, especially if there are the kinds like District of North Vancouver, West Vancouver that tend to be against higher density housing, even though they are now required to update their OCPs, they'll erect other barriers to build these higher density housing, one of them being development cost levies or community amenity contributions in Vancouver, which is specifically extra fees on apartments, which is the less luxury housing, versus they don't exist, or at least they're way lower on the lower detached housing. And one of the things that I'm hoping that the province can perhaps, again, kind of raise the bar a little bit for, because the municipalities are trying to get around it, is housing should be treated equally, if not progressively. So honestly, it should be the other way around, right? If we're going to have these development costs on housing, it should be either equal between detached housing and higher density apartments, or it should be higher on the detached houses, which is the more luxury product. So one of the things that I would love to see is saying, hey, the province saying, hey, communities, you can charge more on these expensive housing, or they have to be equal. Right now, I think in the city of Vancouver, it's about like 50 to 150 per square meter. So the 150 being on apartments, on the higher density housing. That's for more poor people. So one of the places I love it, if you can look into. Thank you. Pitching.
Yeah. No, I hear you, and it's a tough conversation. I'm a little sympathetic to local governments when they are. I know when the infrastructure conversation comes up, because it's there are some communities that do use it as a barrier to get housing built, no doubt about it. But there's a lot of communities that are, when you get elected, it comes with a level of responsibility that you're like, okay, I got to solve this infrastructure question. And so there's got to be a better way. I like the suggestion that you've made, which is if you want to encourage more density, then perhaps you got to figure out how you're structuring the payments to make sure that you're encouraging the right type of activity. But we do need to have a broader conversation. We, in fact, are having a broader conversation, and I think it involves the federal government as well, which is how do we just fund infrastructure? Because the system now, it's just not working. And you're not going to find a mayor or a local government official disagree with that. Well, most of them wouldn't disagree with that. I think most of them would say, we just need the money for the infrastructure, and how we get to it, let's have a conversation. But it requires a federal government partner. And right now, you know, I would say that there's a lot of slogans, but not really any ideas. And I find that very frustrating. And people ask me about the elections, all the federal elections all the time. And I mean, I have views about who should get elected, but my number one thing is let's actually have a conversation about the important things. And the federal government, where they should be playing a role, is involved in infrastructure. The rest of the things we can do, the province can do, local governments can do.
I don't disagree, but I will say that most municipalities, especially around Vancouver, and including Vancouver, have extremely low property taxes. So one of the very clear ways that they should be raising their property values, I'm looking at these certain councillors back here, they should be raising property taxes to pay for infrastructure. I'm sorry, but you have no excuses.
Political winner. There you go.
Sorry, I know it's not politically winner.
It's a tough conversation. It's a tough conversation because those that have homes will be like, oh man, you know, and then those who don't are always like, yeah, you should get it from them. It's that cycle that we find ourselves in all the time. But it needs to be a comprehensive conversation. So this is the first thing we've disagreed on today, and that was not even a disagreement, but it's good.
Well, when we started Abundant Housing, people said the same thing about zoning. They were like, they're never going to change that. And this is to anyone who wants to answer it. So there's about, I forget the exact number, but over about 10 years, BC added about $1.1 trillion in real estate value, from I think 1.2 to 2.3 trillion dollars. And most of that went to the land underneath detached houses, which is just, I mean, it's, there were years, Jens von Bergman, our friend, calculated that there was a year where the land under detached homes increased in value by twice as much as all the income tax receipts in the city of Vancouver. And it's for I think we all feel that. How do you guys see that change of the increasing importance of inherited land wealth as a source of well-being in our society?
I'll go. Favorite topic. So, as Danny was saying earlier, these housing prices are going up higher than we can keep up with, right, in terms of incomes. And one of the reasons why is precisely because we don't raise property taxes. When we have property taxes, that's like what, like a fraction of a percentage a year, we're talking about taxes that are way lower than any other asset you could invest in. And so of course people are going to over-invest into their properties because that's the place where you're seeing tons of extremely high rate of appreciation and no taxes you have to pay on it. And so $1 trillion right there, that is like taxed minimally. And that's why it is so, the housing system, I have a public policy background, and this is one of the systems that have the most regressive, astoundingly regressive laws. If you're a rich person and you're looking for, like Chip Wilson, you know, he's investing in real estate companies for good reason. It's because you pay relatively lower tax rates on that specific asset class. And so, of course, when property values go up, especially in a municipality, that means that because cities only have like a specific amount of budget they need to pay for things. Let's say they need $1 billion, right? They can either raise that through development cost levies, which they shouldn't. You could raise it through multiple means, but whenever property values go up, the tax rate actually goes down and to get the same amount of money. And so what that means is that tax rates go down. People want to invest more into it because it's obviously you don't get taxed as much. And so it becomes this vicious cycle of higher property values, lower tax rates. It is incredibly regressive. And it's called a mill rate. It's like a really weird way of doing taxes in the municipal level. But really, if we can change that, the provincial government, please change it, change the charter. Basically, we need a system where that isn't the case, where we have either some sort of either progressive or flat rate or some way of making it so that that real estate isn't something that is a really, really good thing to invest in, that you can expect tons of appreciation and then make a bunch of generational wealth and then hand it off to your kids, while everybody else who doesn't have that isn't a part of basically an aristocratic landed class. We need to also be able to get access to housing, right? So we need to change this at a system level, because right now it is incredibly regressive.
The next Minister of Housing right here. Yeah, no, it's it's a tough conversation that's been happening across the country, and for all the changes that we have brought on, that's one that I think it needs more public dialogue. As I said earlier when I started this conversation, the changes that we've been able to make have been able to be transformed into action because of the awareness and the conversation in public. This one is not there yet, because I can tell you, when this conversation comes up in my community, parking is like, forget parking. This is a big one, especially in some communities where this is seen as something that I'm going to give to my children, and you're taking that away, and you understand, right? And we hear that a lot as well. But I do think that just how taxation is done and how we look at land, it is a conversation that should be happening in the public. It is a conversation that should be happening at local government level. Are we incentivizing the right type of behavior? And we've been taking action on speculation. Like, we have so many investors that are buying up homes right now and wanting them for short-term rentals. It's a form. It's not quite as far as the policy you're suggesting, but all these measures I think are important to move people to not see housing just as an investment, but seeing it as a home for people to live in. I know it might not be a great answer for folks in this room who want to see that policy. We're not there yet, but as you said, when you started Abundant Housing, it wasn't there in the beginning, but we're there now, and that could something happen over time.
One small step that I imagine might be amenable, especially if you don't want to, impose on the community, on each municipality. So right now, most municipalities will have the exact, or they can only tax both the land value and the building value at the same rate, right? However, we could open it up at the provincial level, saying that, hey, you can charge more for the land value. This is going to help to incentivize more dense housing, because now you don't have to pay for the giant apartment building that's worth tons of money and also has tons of people living on it, versus the detached house, extremely high land value, but practically nobody living on it. And actually, we do see that the places where we have the highest vacant housing is actually in places like Shaughnessy that have really, really expensive houses and land, right? And so if we could make it a choice that municipalities, hey, if you need to raise money, you can totally raise that land value part at a higher rate than the building amount, so which incentivizes the building, more housing, and then disincentivizes hoarding land. That is one way you could say that, hey, we're opening up the policy now so that the cities have the choice to raise the land value tax. I think that could be one way to open it up so that there's some choice here, but also you can't have land value taxes that's lower than the building value. The building is really important. That's the housing we live in.
It sounds like the next campaign is being launched as we speak.
Split rate taxation.
I would not be a popular politician.
We are. Oh, so did you want to say something on that, Dennis?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just idle thoughts. Like, at what point, we have this is all predicated on the idea that a majority of voters have land wealth and they want to protect it. But there are more and more people that don't, and I wonder when that will tick over and they will be in the minority and the politics of this totally change. And that we think about, the compassion that I was talking about earlier, and I don't know, people just feel really excluded and left behind by the way land is governed and taxed here, and I can't think of a better example than the homeowner grant. that we have about $1 billion a year going directly to the people that have accumulated the most wealth. And it was introduced baldly as an electoral move by a social credit government decades ago. And it seems like early on in a term provincially would be a really great time to maybe jettison it. But anyway, that's my little idle thought.
It's just after 8:20 now, so I'm just gonna offer each of you a moment, not too long, please, 'cause people have places to be. Just some quick closing thoughts, and then I have a bit of housekeeping. So we'll start with Jen, if you have anything that's been left unsaid.
Just to echo what Ravi was saying earlier, elections are coming. Talk to all of your friends who's going to vote for people who are going to raise property taxes. I know, it's not popular. But all of the renters like myself, people who don't own land, are going to be more amenable to it. And it's a really important piece of the conversation about why people are over-investing into real estate is because taxes are lower. And to change that, to make property prices go down, that is one of the most important levers, is to raise the taxes on, especially on the land portion, and to help with the incentivizing higher density housing, especially around transit. Super important. Everybody please get involved. Thank you.
I am really optimistic. I wouldn't be doing the work that I do if I weren't optimistic that we can make a really big change in transit in this region. I've seen groups like Movement succeed in other cities in North America, and so I think we can do that here. I think we can get Metro Vancouver to a point where when we come back home from a vacation in Japan or in Paris, that we're not just like, oh, I have to take transit here again. You know what I mean? That like we're punching at that level. But it's gonna take a lot of your work and those emails and phone calls to your MLAs and your mayors and those kinds of things. And so since I've got the mic, I'd just really appreciate if all of you went to movementyvr.ca and joined our list and got involved with some of these campaigns, because it works. Advocacy works.
And I'll just say a big thank you to both Abundant and Movement, because the conversation that's happening here, there's a lot of folks that have housing conversations and transit conversation, but this is a different lens of a conversation, a different perspective of a conversation that you won't see, quite frankly, in many other rooms. And that's why I come back, because I get to learn from other folks, but also be part of this conversation. So thank you for the work you do. I will be back whenever you invite me, because I think there's so much value in what happens here. And the other piece that I think is important is that, you know, you mentioned in 2016 when you started this, and there was only a few of you, and it kept growing and growing and growing. Now you've got jurisdictions across North America that are looking at the changes that were able to be made in BC and thinking, wow, we want to do what's happening over here. You know, I get emails from folks on single egress stairs and saying, hey, can you guys give us your research? Can you share this with us? What, you guys got rid of parking on near transit? All the things that you started in 2016 are happening now, and others are looking to you saying, what are you going to do next? And I already heard a few of the campaigns that are going to launch. So anyways, I just want to say a big thank you for all the work you do, and I want to thank all of you for coming out and being part of this conversation. It gives me hope to see so many folks in this room, and it reminds me that there's a lot more work to do. So thank you very much.
A couple of further thanks. I want to thank the staff and the ushers for helping this happen tonight. Can you a round of applause for them, please? For our wonderful volunteers, in particular, Peter, Owen, and Sam, who were really important to pulling this event off. And of course, for our panelists, thank you all. And last things, I've mentioned it before, if you want to see more events like this, there's a QR code at the back to donate to Abundant Housing Vancouver. And again, municipal by-election, 2 seats available on April 5th. And both Movement and Abundant Housing have our events next Sunday, so you can choose which one. Please come to one at least, or try to go to both. If anyone goes to both, let me know. That would be. I don't know if that would be useful, but it would be kind of funny. But thank you all. This is one of the most beautiful days of the year we've had so far. So thank you for spending it inside in this lovely room with us. And thanks for coming, everyone.